My most popular video I have ever made is one explaining why every killer plays a game like it's a tournament now. If you want to see this video, I'll leave a link to it below, but I break down how most patches for as long as I've been playing the game, Behaviour have been constantly trying to nerf what they consider to be unfun playstyles on the killer role and nerfing any gen regression perk that sees any usage, rather than actually addressing the core issue at hand, which is why killers feel the need to run these perks and playstyles in the first place, and how constantly nerfing these things hasn't and isn't improving the situation. In fact, it's just making matches even sweatier because killers are needing to move to sweatier tactics since the ones they previously used keep getting nerfed, and the reasons that they feel the need to run these tactics in the first place are not being addressed at all. Behaviour are addressing the symptoms but not the problem. This brings us to the upcoming patch. Shoulder the Burden is a brand new perk for the survivor. Once per match, when you unhook a survivor, you can choose to gain the hook state that the person being unhooked has, and they will lose a hook state. So if you haven't been hooked, you will go to first hook stage when you unhook, and if the unhooked player is at second stage when they're on their hook, they will go back to being first stage. Doing this will cause you to scream and become exposed for 20 seconds. Now, I've seen non-stop posts and video titles along the lines of "this perk will save solo queue."
Monsieur, does this mean
Solo queue is saved?
No.
If you genuinely think that this perk will save solo queue, you're just kidding yourself, or you're just straight up clickbaiting. In fact, when I was playing the PTB for about 4 hours, in that time, outside of myself, I saw a single person activate this perk, and it wasn't from lack of tunneling because I managed to activate it damn near every single match. Reminder, this is the PTB where everybody runs the DLC perk, and yet I never saw this perk being ran. Let's get some more data and compare it to some other perks to prove my point just a little bit more. Babysitter and Borrowed Time are 2 perks on the survivor role. Babysitter, in my opinion, is one of the most overtuned perks in the game. When you unhook a survivor for 30 seconds, they have no scratch marks, no blood, and 10% haste. This haste will also stack with the base kit unhook haste speed that you get as well. 10% haste is literally faster than hope, which is one of the strongest endgame survivor perks in the game. 30 seconds of no scratch marks, no blood, and 10% haste is extremely strong for stopping people from tunneling. It makes it so that you can escape very easily because it's very difficult for the killer to track, and even if they do manage to track you, you're going so fast that they just automatically waste 30 seconds for the entire time this perk is up. Borrowed Time also activates when you unhook a survivor. It increases the endurance and haste effects on the unhook, which allows the unhook player to get an endurance hit from the killer if they're hard tunneling, because a killer will be trying to get the hit after 8 seconds, which is when base kit BT runs out, and then they're going to hit the actual BT. I ask you this: when was the last time you saw your solo queue teammates or your solo queue enemies, if you're playing on killer, running Babysitter or Borrowed Time? I can count on one hand the number of times I've seen these perks used, and yet they're some of the strongest anti-tunnel perks in the game. So why does nobody run these perks? Well, it's because they don't directly benefit the perk user, and if the perk is solely used to help your teammates, the odds of a solo survivor going to run it are slim to none. Not only this, but remember at the beginning of the video where I said Shoulder the Burden has a secondary effect where you scream and become exposed for 20 seconds upon activating the perk. This has its own problems we'll get onto in a second. So not only is this a perk like Borrowed Time and Babysitter that only benefits your teammate, but it actually has a negative effect on the person using it. If that isn't a recipe for solo queue kryptonite, I don't know what is. So we've established that this perk won't be used in the vast majority of matches in solo play because solo players are selfish bastards. What other problems does it bring? Well, as with most things, in a Swift, this perk is going to be so broken that I genuinely doubt it's going to be possible to win on killer without using the sweatiest killers ever. The reason for this is right now a good Swift, the only way that you have a chance of winning is strategic tunneling and counting hook states and playing extremely sweaty. This perk in a coordinated Swift will force the user to go for at least 8 hook states because all of them will be running it, which means that they can just chain the unhooks and keep trading the hook states and force you to actually keep getting fresh hook, which, as we've established, you can't do against a good Swift because they're so efficient. A lot of people are then going to use the excuse of, oh, well, you don't play against a Swift all the time, so who cares? You should care. Have you ever played a match against a killer who is playing in the sweatiest, most unenjoyable way ever as a solo queue? Like bleeding you out on the floor while humping you, playing the nurse levels of sweaty? Well, I can guarantee you that they probably just came off the back of an extremely sweaty Swift in a recent match and are now so pissed off that they're taking their anger out on the whole survivor player base. Even if they aren't actively doing something like humping you on the ground, most players will stop trying to do fun builds etc. once they play against a really good Swift and then equip the sweatiest perks and add-ons that they can can and just go in like every match is a tournament to minimize the shit feeling that you get when you get curb stomped by a good Swift. Before this video turns into a Swift balance bitching video, we'll just end it at this perk is going to be disgustingly problematic against Swifts, which will put killers in a bad mood and will make them play even sweatier than they already do, affecting the whole Survivor player base. But it doesn't end there, gamers, so let's go into the next problem, shall we? This perk is just like that of Decisive Strike, Dead Hard, etc., where it is so powerful and so game changing that you're going to need to play every single match as killer, expecting it to be in play. You know how when you come off a hook recently, even if you've touched a generator or you've healed someone and you get downed and the killer will just leave you on the floor because they don't want to risk picking up and getting Decisive Strike? Well, that's because they're trying to counterplay Decisive Strike. Even if you don't have it, they have to assume that it's in play. Now, survivors are going to say, who cares? I don't play killer. Oh, trust me, you're going to care. Because what is the counterplay for this perk? Well, since the only downside is the unhooker gets exposed and that time is only 20 seconds, which is the same length of time as Uberus, it is now in your best interest to capitalize off of this exposed timer as the killer and make that unhooker go second stage or kill them outright if they chose to go second stage from the unhook. Or down the unhooker, then tunnel the person who just got unhooked, since you know the unhooker can't use that perk again. Since it's only 20 seconds that they're exposed, what's the best way that you have to guarantee that you will get that down? That's right, proxy camping. So now anytime that you are second stage on the hook, expect to be proxy camped by the killer because it's in their best interest to do so. They cannot risk losing the pressure of you being second stage. On live right now, when a killer is trying to play to win, but they want to let the survivors have fun, they will get someone to second stage as early as possible, and then if they're above 3 gens or so, they won't just come back and hard tunnel that person who is second stage immediately. That way they know that if someone is second stage and they need to cut the efficiency down, they have someone they can outright kill. This is kind of like a form of insurance for the killers. It's completely unnecessary for them to do this, but they feel confident enough that they can win by doing this while giving the survivors a chance to win as well. Since this perk has the potential to be in play with zero tell for the killer that it's in play until it's too late, they can no longer risk this playstyle anymore. They cannot ensure that that person will stay second stage on the hook, so they're going to need to get that pressure by assuming it will be in play and just proxy camping. Another alternative is that you're going to see killers slugging even more. Slugging bypasses this perk, Decisive Strike, off the record, Dead Hard, forces people off generators into vulnerable positions to pick up, granting you even more pressure. It demoralizes the survivors, increasing their chances of making mistakes, and the list goes on. Remember earlier when I said that nerfing these sweatier playstyles without addressing why they were doing them in the first place results in sweatier, less enjoyable playstyles? Well, here's another example of it. Behavior are again addressing the symptom of tunneling with this perk rather than addressing the problem of why people are tunneling in the first place. In the shitty attempt to lower tunneling, you've made Swift unstoppable, made proxy camping a necessity, massively encouraged slugging, punished people playing nice, and for what? A perk that's rarely going to be used in solo queue, and a perk that makes Swift somehow even more intolerable. I can confidently say that I'm going to be slugging and proxy camping more if this perk goes to live in its current state when I play killer, and I promise you that killer mains are definitely going to do the same. Now, I know there will also be no doubt comments about tunneling and how it's bad and blah 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 blah. Now, I already went through all of this in the previous video with video evidence for it, but the too long didn't give a shit version is that if you don't need to tunnel in some form when playing DBD, it's because you're playing against players who are bad. I would recommend watching my other video for more in-depth thoughts with regard to that and an example. But the point is that if you actually want to stop tunneling, you need to encourage it by making it so that not tunneling is a viable option when playing against decent survivors. And there's always the other comment I see of, well, actually I play Trapper and send myself to Area of Crows while playing with a steering wheel, my monitor's upside down while being tased in the balls because I like the challenge. I'm going to speak on behalf of everyone when I say no one gives a toss what restrictions you put on yourself to make the game harder. Literally nobody cares. Most players come home from work or school and want to boot up an enjoyable experience of Dead by Daylight without being forced to play like it's a tournament to have a chance to win when you play against decent survivors, and it isn't fun when you're having to do the same on Survivor. Ots yesterday just put out a video where he said lately DBD is one of the least fun experiences it's ever been for him because most matches in 1v4 are him being sent to map, extremely strong add-ons and items on both sides being used, and it's extremely sweaty. Now, he has his own reason for why he thinks that is. Personally, I think it's directly because behavior are not addressing the core balance issues in this game and keep trying to put a plaster on a gaping wound, which is just making the situation a lot worse. Rewarding killers for not actively tunneling with some kind of base kit reward would do you significantly better incentive to stop tunneling than adding perks like Shoulder the Burden. Rewarding the player for not doing something instead of punishing them for doing it results in a much healthier gameplay loop overall. Perks like Shoulder the Burden would be completely fine if the alternative playstyles were actually viable, but they're not. I'm going to end with a statement I said in my other video. You cannot sustainably keep nerfing every single gen regression perk, slugging, tunneling, camping, and A-tier killers without giving any of the killers any realistic alternatives, unless of course you want to play Dead by P100 comp nurse every single match. Anyway, that's all for me gamers, enjoy the outro music.